Welcome back to American Agenda. The U.S. Department of Labor tweeted today that last week, 4.4 million Americans filed for unemployment, making the total number of job losses 26 million in only about 5 weeks. Multiple states have begun protesting the stay-at-home regulations and are ready to get back to work. So is reopening immediately truly in the state's best interest right now? President Trump says no last night at a press conference. To weigh in, let's ask our A-plus panel for the day. HerMoney.com editor-in-chief Catherine Tuggle and former SEC Division of Investment Management Director Norm Champ. Welcome. Catherine, we'll begin with you. Slow, steady, controlled opening, or get right to it?
Slow, steady, and controlled. States and local municipalities should be rolling out with the distance and occupancy guidelines soon, and that's what we need. You know, it's not as simple as just opening Las Vegas, right, and getting the blackjack dealers back to the tables and the crab legs out on the buffets, right? Because if 80% of the world isn't getting on a plane to go to these destinations, then, you know, opening before we're ready could have a more detrimental effect on the economy than just staying closed for a few more months until we're in the clear.
And Norm, let's talk about getting on planes. Now, I've taken flights recently, and for obvious reasons, they're not very full. How do you deal with that? I mean, you can say go back to work, and people may not want to go.
And they may not want to get on flights.
Exactly.
They may not want to go into the office. And I think the point is we don't really have any concrete guidelines of what's going to happen. So we keep talking about all across the country, keep talking about going back to work, reopening economy, not reopening. What we're missing is what's the plan for that? You know, if we're talking about people going back to work.
So let me put that on you just for a second, Norm. Could you define it for us? What would you do for that plan?
There's going to have to be some set of circumstances and measures that reassure people that if they go back to work, they're not going to come back sick, right? So what's that a combination of? Are we going to wear masks to work? Are there going to be distances? Are you going to have shifts? Some people go in Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you know, other people Tuesday, Thursday. You know, what are the concrete steps that I think you're right, states and municipalities are going to propose for people to get back into the office? And while we have a broad plan of sort of the phases, we don't have specifics about those protection measures. And I think it's going to have to be some combination of those kinds of things.
Now, Catherine and Norm, I'm assuming that you're both working from home right now. I'd like to hear from both of you on a personal level as to when you would be comfortable to return back to work. Catherine, we'll start with you.
You know, I think it's tough to put a date on it. So I'm always skeptical anytime I hear somebody say, well, July 1st or August 1st, you know, because we just don't know. It depends on how many people are infected. Are we slowing the rate of infection? What kind of office you work in? So I am ready when most of New York says it's ready. But, you know, at Her Money, we were just talking about the fact that our desks at our office in Times Square aren't 6 feet apart. So when we do finally get back to work, what do we do with our desks? I mean, there's so many questions.
Yeah, Norm?
So you have so many questions, and I would also say that, you know, I count myself among the fortunate. There's only about a third of Americans who can work from home. And so we really need to think also about the 2/3 of Americans who can't work from home. And one thing I would say, you know, is I think it's important for folks to think about the expense side right now and looking at expenses and cutting those if they can, because as was stated, we just don't know exactly when it's going to be. When are we going to have procedures that make people feel safe enough to go back? I have a feeling that for those who can work from home, I have a feeling those people are going to be told to stay and continue working from home, right? Why would you increase the number? I think the measures are going to be more aimed at people who can't work from home but need to get out of the house and get back to work. So I have a feeling that working from home, for those third who can, I think they're going to be doing so maybe longer than they think.
Yeah, I have found, you know, we have a lot of members of our team that are working from home now, but there is a lack of communication, not to mention people do like to be with other people sometimes, Catherine. Can you hear me, Catherine?
Well, Norm, we'll get you to chime in on this. I can say yesterday I had a Skype session with some friends that I hadn't seen in a really long time. And it was refreshing, really, just to even just see them. But there is that human contact element that I think a lot of us are missing, and some communication that can happen in the workplace that's really hard to have over the phone.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I think people do like to have that element of working together, though, Norm.
We're really missing, right? I'm a lawyer in private practice. We're all missing the sort of walk down the hall, grab somebody. Oh, hey, what do you think about this? That's what we're missing, is that sort of informal interaction. Same thing, doing lots of Zoom calls and Skype calls and everything else with the team, trying to keep up that communication. That's the hardest part. And that communication is an integral part of training your team, right? So when we're all isolated, much harder to train the team. So much training takes place in the, it doesn't necessarily take place in a formal meeting, right? It takes place in between when you're working out problems, figuring out.
Yeah, that's usually when you're in the same place. It seems like that camaraderie, Catherine, that's important to develop on a team. It's hard to get that on Zoom.
Definitely. I think about when I was a young reporter starting out, I learned most of my key facets of my job just by listening to the other reporters and editors in the newsroom who were older and wiser than me. So,
so you actually listen to people older than you? I haven't found that. Sorry.
It's my secret to success.
Okay, so as we go forward, Times Square you mentioned, Catherine. Give me a time frame for that.
Oh, it's so tough, right?
Yeah.
I would like to think June 1st. I've got my hand sanitizer. I've got my mask. I'm ready. But, we'll see. We'll see what the virus is doing at that point in time.
Yeah, Catherine, we were talking to a friend that's actually still working in New York City right now, of course, going through all the precautions, doing what she's supposed to do. But she just talked about that eerie feeling in the city right now that is so silent. It's just so strange.
It's really quiet. It feels, if you've ever been here for Thanksgiving weekend when most of the city vanishes, the whole thing feels like Thanksgiving weekend. There's just nobody around.
Interesting, because the week before and then soon after that, it's packed. Catherine, thank you very much. Catherine Tuggle and Norm Champ, thank you. Coming up, more coverage of the coronavirus crisis.